Hello, church family. I'm a little bit later than usual tonight. I had some other things going on, so this is, rather than being taped real early, this is being videoed later, and it's going to come out later in the evening. But I'm thankful. I'm glad to be with you on this Wednesday evening in worship and sharing a few things, lessons that I've learned over the years. And one more disclaimer: every week I say, this isn't necessarily theological. It's not necessarily a Bible study. These are just things that I picked up over my years of ministry, and what works for me may not be useful to you, but I hope something in this is useful to you. Now, the story I've got today. Back when I was in grad school, I took this class in worship. It was a fascinating class. It went deeper and farther back. It was actually a class in historical church worship, but I didn't know that at the time, than anything that I'd taken along those lines. I grew up worshiping like most of you grew up worshiping. I like this type of song, or I like that type of song, or this is the style of service we had when I was a kid, or something like that, or I kind of like this innovation, or I like adding technology or something. But I'd never gone into a deep detail of the history of Christian worship. Well, during that class, our professor split us up into some teams, and each team was responsible for recreating as authentically as possible a worship experience from a certain time in history. It was a lot of fun, a lot of work, but a lot of fun. So I took some of the things that I learned in that class and I brought it home, and I tried an experiment one year. I tried it with the youth group that went to our church, and at that time we had a pretty good sized youth group, and so I did a little bit of selective culling out, just a little bit. I asked my youth leader if he would pick some students that would work a little harder, do homework, dig a little bit deep, and take this like a class. It wasn't just a party time or a normal youth group time. And then we put together what we called 21 centuries of Christianity in 21 weeks. And so every week we would meet together and worship in the style of that century, from the first century up to the 20th century or 21st century. And then we would also discuss probably the touchiest, most controversial Christian issue going on in that period of history. Well, it was more exciting than anything I could have imagined. I remember that during the first few years, or first few centuries, when Christianity was illegal, we would make these secret codes. We would quietly meet, set aside our meeting places. We would try to hide from our parents, and the parents were the Roman guards, and we were the underground, and we thought we got away with it one night. We'd been doing fairly well, and we went down to this old bank underground in the old vault in the basement in a place that wasn't used anymore. I had permission to use it that night, and we had this secret service, but somebody's brother or sister or something got wind of what we were doing, tipped off the parents, and we got raided and hauled off in chains. And it was actually kind of frightening and exhilarating too. When we did the monastic studies along about the 6th century, and we started going in to the monasteries, we actually did Gregorian chant. We spent a weekend together worshiping with the hours of prayer during the day. And one night, toward evening, one of the dear saints of our church was near the end of her life. And I needed to go and leave the group and go by her side in the hospital and have prayer with her and her family. My youth wanted to go with me. So as many youth as volunteered, we all went very, very quietly, very reverently to her hospital room and circled around her in prayer that evening, her and her family. It was a unimaginable time. Well, of course, it took us, of the 21 weeks, it took us 15 weeks to get to the Protestant Reformation, which gave a new insight to our youth. And then when we got to the end, we did a 21st century postmodern worship service. We redecorated the entire church, the educational wing, everything in it, and we did kind of a sort of like a maze or a something like that, a contemplative type of thing, where each room was set up a different way. It was all kind of darkened. There were candles going from room to room, a different kind of music in each place representing a different style of worship. And then it led us to the sanctuary where we had a very quiet, very reverent Taizé type service. Well, that's been one of the highlights of my time with youth. And the youth also. Some of you that are listening, and some of your children were a part of that, and some of you were a part of that, and still I hear youth talking about that from time to time. And I wrote in my notebook, my lessons learned notebook. I came to it and I wrote to myself, take your people on your faith journey with you. Even teens can handle it. And your growth areas reveal your passion, and passion is contagious. Over the years, I've had classes like Sunday school classes on how to preach a sermon. Okay, kind of dry, kind of boring maybe for some, but electrifying for others. And we talked about exegetical Bible study. Now, I actually used to teach guitar. And so in one of my churches that I was pastor of, we had a Sunday school class on learning the guitar and using guitar in praise and worship. That was exciting. Of course, I'm a Benedictine oblate, as well as being a Protestant pastor. And so I've spent a lot of time in monasteries. And I got for a while where I would volunteer to take different lay people with me to monasteries. And then we would get there and they would do their thing, I would do mine, and they would have a private worship experience. For a while when I was working with Emmaus, the Walk to Emmaus, our church sent like over 100 people on the Walk to Emmaus. And I could think of other things. Some of my Sunday school classes have worked with, even the Sunday school class we're doing that we have now, have wrestled with the thoughts of some of the deepest, most respectable theologians in church history. More than just, Dairy Queen, McDonald's, fast food style Christianity. We've looked at the writings of Bonhoeffer and the life of Francis of Assisi and things like that. And all the way through those different things, and sometimes playful things too. We just volunteered to share where I was growing, where the people grew. Some of my church boards, we would sit down and we would talk about what makes a good sermon. And then whenever we would have a camp meeting or a guest speaker, sometimes we just set aside and we'd say, okay, was this a good setup, a good sermon? We don't have to be lightweight. We don't have to be kind of, there's my grandfather's clock again. We don't have to be fast food for Christianity in order to grow. We can grow deep. I even took a class one time, and this didn't go over so well, but a Sunday school class where we would tinker around the Greek a little bit and the importance of it and knowing how to choose one version of the Bible from another. And those things at certain times and certain places are great. So what I would like to share with you is in your life, there is a place where you're growing. There's a place where you're learning. Wherever that place is, share it with others. I remember one time as I was studying prayer and different types of prayer, I would take people on prayer retreats and things like that. When I was a kid, I was raised, of course, in an evangelical holiness church, and we were taught certain ways to share the gospel, sort of like canned sales presentations. The four spiritual laws was one. You have a little booklet, you open it up, and you share from the four spiritual laws. You know, God loves you and has a plan for your life. The Romans road that I've talked about in church before was another one. Here's in the book of Romans, how to go through it. There are many ways to share evangelism, explosion, EE. There are many ways to share the gospel. But I think one of the most authentic ways is just to be candid and open and honest and just share what God's doing in your life, where you're at, where you're struggling to grow, where you're growing at, what new things you've learned. Share them back and forth, and you help each other grow while we're at it. So if you're a parent with your children, of course there's a time and a place for Noah's Ark and the stories of, you know, the little children learn in Sunday school, but share deep stuff with them too. If you're a teacher, a leader at the church, share your faith where it's really at, not just a canned presentation. And if you are just learning how to share your faith in an organized, structured way, there was a time in my life when that was important, then learn by all means a canned way to share your faith. But just be the real you where you are at and take people with you, because where you are growing is where your passion's at. And where your passion is at will be contagious for other people. And whether they are teenagers or preteens or adults, they can handle it. It's better to give solid food sometimes than just stay on candy. I'm getting ready to finish this, and as I'm finishing, I'm thinking my daughter, when she was in Sunday school class, she was in fourth grade, and her Sunday school teacher came to me, and they had these little cutouts and little things, just scissors you use, and she was the only person in her Sunday school class that was that liked the prayers of Kierkegaard. Well, that makes sense. I'm kind of a geek, so you know, I raised a daughter that kind of liked that stuff too. And that was where my passion was at, reflected in her. So I hope this, I don't know if it's helpful or not, but it's okay to grow. I said a few weeks ago to grow and never stop growing. And it's also right to take other people on the journey with you. That being said, it's a busy week, a busy time of year. School's in full motion, and we had a number of prayer requests at church this past week, and let's be praying for each other. And may God bless you as you go through the rest of this week. Oh yeah, let me come back. COVID is around the place right now, and I'm learning how to tape myself, which is what I've never done before. I'm kind of having fun with it, as you can tell, but I'm taking you with me now into cyberspace or multimedia or whatever we're in, and we're doing this together too, you and I right now. So another example of taking other people with you wherever you go. Okay?